The parade ground shimmered beneath the harsh summer sun. Boots struck concrete in perfect rhythm. Metals flashed like sparks, and the national flag moved slowly in the hot wind. I stood in the second row of officers, shoulders straight, face expressionless. But inside me, something was already cracking. Today was supposed to be my day. For 3 years, I had led the Falcon Shield Defense Project, a classified military communications system designed to protect frontline units during electronic warfare. I had slept in laboratories, missed funerals, and ignored my own health to keep that project alive. And my wife knew that better than anyone. Colonel Sarah Ramon stood on the stage in full dress uniform, sharp as a blade. The crowd admired her discipline, her confidence, her command presence. I admired her too once. Maybe I still did, and that was the problem. The announcer cleared his throat. By order of the Defense Procurement Board, Lieutenant Colonel Hamza Malik is hereby promoted to Director of Strategic Systems. For a second I thought I had misheard. Hamza, not me. The applause began. My ears rang. Hamza Malik walked to the stage with a modest smile, accepting the new insignia as if it had always belonged to him. Sarah pinned the badge onto his chest. Their eyes met for a fraction too long. That was when I understood. Hamza was not just a colleague. He was her ex-husband, the man she had once wanted to marry before military politics separated them. I felt the blood drain from my face. Brigadier Farouk leaned toward me and whispered, "Armin." I didn't know. Neither did I. Sarah turned toward the audience. Director Malik has demonstrated exceptional leadership and strategic vision. I have full confidence in his ability to lead Falcon Shield into its next phase. Falcon Shield. My project. My work. My sacrifice. She didn't mention my name once. I clapped because everyone else clapped. The sound of my own hands felt like an insult. After the ceremony, officers gathered around Hamza, congratulating him. Sarah stood beside him, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. I walked away before anyone noticed my expression. Our military residence was silent when I entered. I removed my cap and placed it carefully on the table. My hands were steady, which frightened me more than anger would have. 30 minutes later, the front door opened. Sarah entered, still wearing her uniform. "You left early," she said. "I wasn't needed." She sighed. "Armin, don't start." "Start what?" "The celebration of your ex becoming my boss." Her jaw tightened. This was a professional decision. I laughed once. It sounded bitter even to me. Professional? You promoted the man who hasn't touched this project in 2 years. He has strategic experience. I built the system. You built part of it. That sentence hit harder than a slap. Part of it. I stared at her, searching for the woman who used to sit beside me at midnight while I reviewed encryption code. The woman who once said, "No one understands your mind the way I do." "Tell me honestly," I said quietly. "If Hamza were not your ex, would he still have received that promotion?" Silence. That was answer enough. "Armin," she said, softer now, "you're emotional." Emotional? I gave this institution everything. And so did I. But you chose him. Her eyes flashed. I chose the officer best suited for the role. "No," I said. "You chose the past." She turned away, removing her gloves. "I won't discuss this further." That hurt most of all. Not the promotion. Not the humiliation. The dismissal. I walked into my study and closed the door. On the desk lay the final contract package for Falcon Shield Phase 3, a 12 billion rupee defense agreement requiring my technical authorization before implementation. My signature was the final key. I stared at the pen for a long time. Then my secure phone vibrated. Classified, private line. Colonel Armin speaking. A familiar voice answered. "Sir, this is Major Nadia Khan from Defense Intelligence. We need to meet immediately." "Why?" A pause. "Because Director Hamza Malik has been communicating with a foreign contractor currently under investigation." Cold spread through my chest. "When?" "For the past 6 months." I looked toward the closed study door. 6 months. The same period during which Sarah had been lobbying for his promotion. "Send me everything," I said. Encrypted file incoming. The data arrived seconds later. Emails. Financial transfers. Meeting logs. My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. Years in military intelligence had taught me that the most dangerous moments often felt strangely calm. I opened the first document. Hamza had shared preliminary architecture details of Falcon Shield with Orion Dynamics, a foreign defense company previously accused of unauthorized technology acquisition. My hand clenched. This was not favoritism anymore. This was a security breach. I heard Sarah moving in the kitchen. The woman I loved was standing 10 meters away, unaware that the man she had just promoted might have compromised a classified defense program. For one reckless second, I wanted to march outside, throw the documents onto the table, and demand an explanation. Instead, I closed the file, because another realization had arrived. If I exposed Hamza tonight, the scandal would destroy Sarah's career along with his. The media would call it corruption. Parliament would demand hearings. Her rank, her reputation, everything she had worked for would burn. And despite what she had done to me, I still couldn't bear that thought. Not yet. I opened the contract package again. My signature line waited at the bottom of the page. I picked up the pen. Then I set it down. No, not until I knew the full truth. I locked the contract in the safe. Outside, Sarah knocked once on the study door. Dinner is ready. I looked at the safe, then at the classified file glowing on my screen. Armin, I took a slow breath. In a minute, but I already knew that nothing in this house would ever be the same again. That night, I lay awake listening to the distant hum of military vehicles beyond the compound walls. Sarah slept beside me, breathing evenly, as if our world had not shifted. I stared into the darkness and made the first decision of my new life. I would investigate Hamza myself, and if the evidence proved true, I would cancel the defense contract, walk away from the institution that had betrayed me, and disappear from both their lives forever. By midnight, the house was silent, but Armin couldn't sleep. He sat alone in his study, still wearing the dark suit he'd worn to Colonel Victoria Hale's promotion ceremony. The celebration was over, the guests were gone, and Victoria had already gone upstairs without saying another word. On the desk in front of him lay a single folder. Project Sentinel, Defense Procurement. Armin stared at it for several minutes. He had spent the last 6 years helping build Sentinel from the ground up. Officially, it was a defense technology contract worth hundreds of millions. Unofficially, it was the most important project he had ever touched. And now Victoria had transferred the primary contract authority to her former lover, Major Daniel Cross. Her ex, the man she'd once told Armin was nothing more than a painful chapter from her past. Armin opened the folder. The first pages contained ordinary procurement documents. Then he noticed something. A signature. He leaned closer. The authorization had been approved 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks. That meant Victoria had been planning this long before the promotion ceremony. Armin's jaw tightened. He turned another page. There was Daniel's name. Primary Strategic Consultant, Daniel Cross. Armin stopped breathing for a moment. Why him? He whispered the question to an empty room. He knew Daniel's reputation. Daniel was intelligent, charismatic, and extremely ambitious. He had served in the military before leaving under circumstances that were never publicly explained. Victoria had always defended him. Daniel made mistakes. Daniel was under pressure. Daniel deserves another chance. Armin had never argued. He trusted his wife. That trust now felt like the stupidest decision of his life. He pulled another document from the folder. This one was different. It contained financial allocations. Armin scanned the figures. Then his eyes widened. Nearly $48 million had been moved into a subcontracting division controlled by a company called Cross Strategic Solutions. He searched the company's registration number. His computer returned a familiar name. Daniel Cross. Armin leaned back. So that's what this is. The betrayal suddenly looked much bigger than a promotion. Victoria hadn't simply chosen Daniel over him. She had given Daniel access to the heart of a defense contract. And she had done it without telling her husband. Armin opened the secure database and began searching through old procurement records. For the next 2 hours, he found nothing. Then, at 2:17 a.m., one file appeared. It was marked, Restricted, Internal Audit. Armin clicked it. A warning appeared. Unauthorized access will be reported. He hesitated. He had enough clearance to view the document. He entered his credentials. The file opened. Inside were several reports concerning equipment failures, missing components, and unexplained financial discrepancies. Armin, read faster. The first incident had occurred 6 months earlier. A shipment of Sentinel communication modules had disappeared. The second involved altered software specifications. The third concerned a supplier that had suddenly been replaced by another company. And that second company was owned by... Armin froze. Cross Strategic Solutions. His heart began pounding. He printed the report. Then another. And another. By 3 a.m., his desk was covered with papers. There was a pattern. Every time something went wrong with Sentinel, Daniel's company somehow benefited. But there was one problem. The official investigation had concluded that the incidents were administrative errors. Armin knew that was impossible. He had designed part of the system himself. These weren't random mistakes. Someone was deliberately manipulating the project. He reached for his phone. There was only one person he could call. His former colleague, Commander Ethan Reed. Armin dialed. After several rings, Ethan answered sleepily. Armin, do you know what time it is? Yes. Then this better be important. It is. Ethan's voice immediately changed. What happened? I need you to check something for me. Send it. I can't send it electronically. A pause. That's serious? Very. Ethan sat up. What are you looking for? Cross Strategic Solutions. Silence. Then Ethan said quietly, What? Because they're handling Sentinel. Another pause. Armin. What? Don't touch anything else. Armin's eyes narrowed. What? Because I've heard that name before. Where? I can't talk about it over the phone. Armin stood. Then meet me. When? Tomorrow morning. Where? The old command archive. Ethan hesitated. Fine. 6. The call ended. Armin placed the phone on the desk. For the first time that night, he felt afraid. Not because Victoria had betrayed him. Not because Daniel had taken his position. But because someone had been quietly manipulating a major defense project from inside. And Victoria appeared to be helping them. At 4:12 a.m., Armin heard footsteps. He quickly shut the laptop. The study door opened. Victoria stood there. She was wearing a black robe, her hair tied loosely behind her head. What are you doing? Armin looked at her. Working. At 4 in the morning? I couldn't sleep. Victoria stepped into the room. Her eyes moved toward the papers. What are those? Sentinel documents. Her expression changed, only for a fraction of a second. But Armin noticed. Why are you reviewing them? Because I'm still responsible for the project. No. Victoria's voice hardened. You're not. Armin stared at her. Excuse me. You transferred authority to Daniel. I transferred operational authority. Without telling me. This isn't personal. Armin almost laughed. Everything you've done tonight is personal. Victoria crossed her arms. You've always been insecure about Daniel. I'm not insecure. You've never trusted him. I didn't trust him because I knew him. And I did. Armin slowly stood. Then tell me something. What? Why did Cross Strategic Solutions receive $48 million? Victoria's face went still. Armin watched her carefully. She didn't answer. Victoria? Where did you get that number? That's not an answer. Those documents are classified. I have clearance. Not anymore. The words hit him harder than she probably intended. Armin stared at his wife. What did you just say? Victoria looked away. You were removed from the Sentinel authorization chain this afternoon. By you? Yes. Why? Because I don't trust your judgment anymore. Armin slowly nodded. So you trust Daniel? Yes. There it was. No hesitation. No guilt. Just one word. Yes. Armin felt something inside him break. He looked at the woman he'd married. The woman he'd defended. The woman he'd supported through deployments, promotions, sleepless nights, and years of sacrifice. And suddenly she looked like a stranger. Then I hope you know what you're doing, Colonel. Victoria frowned. What does that mean? It means I'm done arguing. He gathered the documents. Victoria stepped forward. Give me those. Armin looked at her. No. Armin, you've already taken my position. He placed the folder inside his briefcase. You don't get to take my dignity too. Victoria's expression hardened. You are making a mistake. Armin walked toward the door. No. He stopped beside her. For the first time, I'm correcting one. Then he walked away. Victoria remained standing in the study. She had expected anger. She had expected jealousy. She had even expected Armin to beg her to reconsider. She hadn't expected silence. And she certainly hadn't expected him to walk away. But what Victoria didn't know was that Armin wasn't walking away from Sentinel yet. He was going hunting, because by sunrise, he intended to find out exactly who was behind Daniel Cross. And if the evidence confirmed what he suspected, the entire defense contract would come crashing down. At exactly 6 in the morning, Armin reached the old command archive. The building had been abandoned for years. Once, it had been one of the most secure intelligence facilities in the country. Now its concrete walls were stained by rain. The windows were covered with dust, and weeds grew through cracks in the parking lot. But the security system still worked. Armin entered the access code. The steel door unlocked. Inside, Commander Ethan Reed was waiting. He stood beside an old metal table with 2 cups of coffee. "You look terrible," Ethan said. "I didn't sleep. I guessed." Armin placed his briefcase on the table. "Show me what you found." Ethan didn't touch the documents. Instead, he looked directly at Armin. "Before we start, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If this gets bigger than we think it is, you walk away." Armin frowned. "That's not happening. Listen to me." Ethan's voice became serious. "You've got a wife who's a colonel. You've got a defense contract worth hundreds of millions. And you've got Daniel Cross suddenly appearing in the middle of it." "I know." "No, Armin. You don't know." Ethan opened a drawer and pulled out a thin black file. "This is why I recognize the name." He pushed it across the table. Armin opened it. The first page contained Daniel's military photograph. The second page showed his service history. The third contained a classified investigation. Armin's expression changed. "Where did you get this?" 3 years ago." "What happened?" Ethan lowered his voice. "Daniel was suspected of leaking operational data." Armin looked up. "Suspected?" "The investigation was never completed." "Why?" "Because the witness disappeared." Armin stared at the file. "Who was the witness?" Ethan hesitated. "An intelligence analyst named Marcus Vale." Armin's eyes narrowed. "He's dead." "No." "Then where is he?" "Officially, nobody knows." Armin turned another page. There was a photograph of Marcus. Then, a handwritten note. "Last known contact, Daniel Cross." Armin felt a chill. Victoria knew about this? Probably. Probably isn't good enough. Ethan sighed. "Your wife was one of the officers who reviewed the preliminary investigation." Armin closed his eyes. That hurt more than he expected. Victoria had known. She knew Daniel had been investigated for leaking sensitive information. She knew a witness had disappeared, and yet she had given him control of Sentinel. Why would she do that? Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out another document. "Look at the company ownership." Armin examined it. Cross Strategic Solutions wasn't actually owned by Daniel. It was owned by a holding company. The holding company's director was a man named Victor Hale. Armin stared at the name. "Hale." Ethan nodded. "Yes." "Related to Victoria?" "Her father." Armin slowly put the document down. Everything suddenly became more complicated. Daniel wasn't simply Victoria's ex. He was connected to her family. And now he controlled a company receiving millions from a defense contract overseen by Victoria. Armin felt his stomach tighten. "Does Victoria know that her father owns the holding company?" "Yes. I'd bet my career on it." Armin stood. "So this was planned?" Ethan looked at him. "Maybe." "No." Armin shook his head. "It wasn't a promotion." He pointed at the documents. "It was a transfer of control." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's what I think." Armin began pacing. "Why me?" "Because you built Sentinel." "Exactly." Ethan watched him carefully. "Maybe that's why." Armin stopped. "What do you mean?" "Maybe they don't need you anymore." The words hung in the room. Armin looked down at the file. He had spent 6 years building the Sentinel network. He had designed its encrypted communication architecture. He had personally tested its emergency response system. He knew every vulnerability, every safeguard, every hidden access point. If someone wanted to control Sentinel, they needed Armin out of the way. Suddenly, Victoria's behavior made sense. The promotion, Daniel's appointment, the sudden removal of Armin's authorization. It wasn't about jealousy. It was about eliminating him. Armin reached for his phone. "I need to check something." "What?" "Contract Cancellation Authority." Ethan frowned. You can't cancel Sentinel. Not yet. Armin opened the legal section of the original defense agreement. His eyes moved quickly across the clauses. Then he smiled. Ethan noticed. What? Clause 17. What about it? The contract requires the original technical architect to approve any transfer of core technology rights. Ethan leaned closer. And you're the original architect. Exactly. Can they override you? Not without triggering a breach. Ethan stared at him. Armin, if they continue using the system without my authorization, the entire contract becomes legally invalid. Ethan slowly smiled. So you still have one card? More than one. Armin closed the file. But I need proof. Proof of what? That Daniel is manipulating the project. Ethan nodded. Then we find it. They spent the next 4 hours searching archived records. At 10:26 a.m., they found something. A procurement invoice. The date was 6 months old. The supplier listed was Cross Strategic Solutions. The equipment description was vague. Encrypted battlefield relay modules. Quantity, 800. Total value, $12.4 million. Armin checked the delivery records. Nothing. No warehouse receipt. No military acceptance report. No deployment record. The equipment had never existed. Ghost shipment, Ethan whispered. Armin stared at the invoice. Someone paid $12 million for equipment that was never delivered. Who approved it? Armin checked the authorization. His face changed. Victoria. Ethan said nothing. Armin looked at the screen for a long moment. His wife had personally approved a $12 million payment to a company secretly controlled by her father. He felt something inside him go cold. Then another file appeared. This one contained a list of recent Sentinel contractors. Armin scrolled down. There was a company he'd never seen before. North Star Logistics. He clicked the ownership record. The screen loaded. The owner was Marcus Vale. Armin and Ethan looked at each other. The missing witness, Ethan whispered. Armin's pulse accelerated. Marcus wasn't dead. He was alive, and he was connected to Sentinel. Someone had been hiding him. Armin quickly printed the information. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Hello. No response. Who is this? A distorted voice finally spoke. Stop looking. Armin froze. Who are you? You don't understand what you're dealing with. Then explain it. You're already too close. Where is Marcus Vale? Silence. Then the caller said, Ask your wife. The line disconnected. Armin stared at the phone. Ethan looked concerned. What happened? Armin slowly put the phone down. They know we're investigating. Ethan stood. Then we need to move. But before they could leave, Armin's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message. One sentence. Your wife chose Daniel because she believes he can save her family. Armin's blood ran cold. He showed Ethan. Ethan read it twice. Could be manipulation. Maybe. Armin looked toward the dusty windows. But now I need to know what her family is trying to save. That evening, Armin returned home. Victoria was waiting in the living room. She looked exhausted. Where were you? Working. With Ethan. Armin stopped. How do you know? Victoria didn't answer. Armin understood. She had been watching him. He slowly removed his coat. Victoria, I need to ask you something. What? Who is Marcus Vale? Her face went pale. Only for a second. But Armin saw it. And in that moment, he knew. Victoria wasn't surprised by the name. She was afraid of it. Where did you hear that? Answer me. I don't know anyone by that name. Armin smiled bitterly. That's a lie. Victoria's expression hardened. Be careful. I've spent 6 years protecting you. And I've spent 6 years protecting this country. No. Armin's voice became cold. You're protecting your family. Victoria stepped toward him. You don't understand. Then explain. I can't. Because you don't trust me? She looked into his eyes. Because if I tell you, you won't be safe. Armin stared at her. For the first time, he saw something behind her anger. Fear. Real fear. Then Victoria whispered, Please, Armin, walk away from Sentinel. Why? Because Daniel isn't the real danger. Armin's expression changed. Then who is? Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Before she could answer, the lights suddenly went out. The house went completely dark. Then came the sound of glass breaking upstairs. Victoria immediately reached for her weapon. Armin grabbed her arm. Stay behind me. They moved silently toward the hallway. A shadow disappeared through the upstairs window. Armin ran toward the staircase. On the floor outside his study lay his black briefcase. It had been opened. The classified documents were gone. Only one piece of paper remained. Armin picked it up. There were 4 words written in black ink. You were warned, Armin. He looked at Victoria. She was staring at the message. And for the first time since their marriage began, she looked genuinely terrified. The room remained dark. For several seconds, neither Armin nor Victoria moved. The only light came from the moon spilling through the shattered upstairs window. Armin still held the note. You were warned, Armin. Victoria stood behind him, weapon raised, her breathing unsteady. Put it down, she whispered. Armin turned. Why? Because whoever broke and wanted you to find it. And that means they want you scared. Armin looked at her. I'm not scared. Victoria's eyes hardened. You should be. For the first time, Armin noticed something unusual. Her hands were trembling. The woman who had commanded hundreds of soldiers without hesitation was terrified. Not of him, not of the intruder, of whatever was coming next. Armin lowered the paper. Tell me the truth. Victoria looked away. I can't. You can. Armin. Who is Victor Hale? Victoria froze. The silence answered him. Armin stepped closer. Your father owns the company behind Daniel's operation. Victoria closed her eyes. You found it. I found more than that. He placed the documents on the table. $48 million transferred to Daniel's company. Victoria said nothing. $12 million for equipment that was never delivered. Still nothing. Marcus Vale. Her face changed. Don't say his name. Why? Because you don't know what it means. Then tell me. Victoria shook her head. You need to leave this alone. That's what the person who broke into our house told me. Her eyes met his. I didn't send them. I know. Then believe me. Armin laughed quietly. Believe you? His voice cracked. I believed you when you told me Daniel was nothing. I never said he was nothing. You said he was your past. He was. Then why does he control my life's work? Victoria looked down. Because I had no choice. Armin's expression hardened. Everyone says that when they make a choice, they're ashamed of. Victoria walked toward the window. My father is sick. Armin said nothing. He has been under investigation for months. Financial crimes? Not just financial crimes. She turned. Military corruption. Armin felt his stomach drop. What did he do? I don't know everything. But you know enough. Victoria swallowed. My father built his company through military contracts. For years, he supplied equipment to government agencies. Then auditors discovered irregularities. How much? Over $200 million. Armin stared at her. $200 million? Victoria nodded. He was going to prison. And Daniel? Daniel offered to help. Of course he did. Victoria's expression tightened. He had connections. With whom? I don't know. Victoria. She hesitated. Foreign brokers. Armin went silent. That single phrase changed everything. Daniel wasn't merely involved in corruption. He might have connections outside the country. Victoria continued. My father believed Daniel could move money through shell companies and erase the evidence. And you helped them. I tried to stop it. Armin looked at her. By giving Daniel control of Sentinel, I thought I could control the situation from inside. That's your excuse? It's the truth. No. Armin shook his head. You knew Daniel was dangerous. Yes. You knew your father was corrupt. Yes. And you still put both of them near a classified defense system. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I thought I could fix it. Armin stared at her. You couldn't. I know. The room fell silent. Then Victoria whispered. That's why I promoted Daniel. Armin looked confused. What? I didn't promote him because I trusted him. Then why? Because I needed him close. Armin stared at her. Close to what? To me. Why? So I could find out what he was planning. Armin stepped back. And you expected me to understand that? I couldn't tell you. Why not? Because your phone was compromised. Armin froze. What? Someone has been monitoring you for months. He shook his head. No. I found spyware on your personal device. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know who installed it. Armin looked toward his phone. How long? 3 months. And you said nothing? I was trying to protect you. You were lying to me. Yes. The word came quietly, but it hurt more than shouting. Armin turned away. For years, he had believed their marriage was built on trust. Now he realized it had been built on secrets. He looked at Victoria. Did you ever love me? She immediately answered, yes. Then why did you make me feel like I was nothing? Victoria's tears finally fell. Because if Daniel believed I cared about you, he would use you against me. Armin stared at her. Did he threaten you? Victoria didn't answer. That was enough. Armin moved closer. What did he threaten? My father's life. Armin's expression changed. He threatened to kill your father? Yes. And you believed him? I've seen what he's capable of. Armin remembered the break-in, the missing files, the warning. He suddenly understood why Victoria was terrified. But another question remained. Where is Marcus Vale? Victoria shook her head. I don't know. You're lying. I'm not. You reacted when I said his name. Because Marcus is the only man who can prove what Daniel did. Armin stared at her. What did Daniel do? Victoria whispered. He didn't leak information. Armin frowned. What? He stole it. The room seemed to shrink. How much? Everything. Sentinel. Sentinel. Other systems? Several. To whom? Victoria looked at the broken window. We don't know. Armin felt cold. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. Victoria immediately whispered, don't answer. Armin did anyway. Hello. A man's voice spoke. You finally know. Armin recognized it. Daniel. What do you want? Your wife. Victoria's face went pale. Armin tightened his grip on the phone. You'll never get her. Daniel laughed. You're still pretending this is about marriage. What is it about? Control. Over Sentinel? Over everything. Armin looked at Victoria. Daniel continued. Cancel the contract. Armin frowned. What? Cancel Sentinel. Why? Because if you don't, people will die. Armin remained silent. Daniel's voice became colder. You have 48 hours. The call ended. Victoria looked at Armin. What did he say? Armin slowly lowered the phone. He wanted me to cancel Sentinel. Victoria stared at him. Then do it. Armin looked shocked. You want me to cancel it? Yes. Why? Because he's not bluffing. Armin walked to the desk. For the first time, he understood the real trap. Daniel wanted the contract canceled. But why? If Daniel wanted control of Sentinel, wouldn't he want a contract to continue? Unless the contract itself was protecting something. Armin opened the original agreement. He read Clause 17 again, then Clause 23. His eyes widened. Victoria, what? The contract can't be transferred without my authorization. I know. And if it's canceled, what happens? All proprietary technology rights automatically return to my company. Victoria stared at him. Meaning Daniel loses access. She slowly understood. He wants you to cancel it. Exactly. And then Armin looked at the documents. Then we walk away. Victoria shook her head. No. What? That's what he wants. Armin looked at her. Then why? Because once you cancel the contract, Sentinel becomes privately controlled. Armin frowned. By my company. Victoria's expression changed. That's the problem. Armin suddenly understood. Daniel didn't want the government contract. He wanted the technology. And by forcing Armin to cancel the contract, Daniel could attack the private company afterward and steal Sentinel without government oversight. Armin slowly smiled. He thinks he's trapped me. Victoria stared at him. What are you going to do? Armin closed the file. Give him exactly what he wants. Victoria's eyes widened. Armin, no. Tomorrow morning, I'll announce the cancellation. That's suicide. No. Armin looked at her. It's bait. Victoria stared at him. For the first time that night, something changed in her expression. Hope. But Armin wasn't finished. He opened his laptop. I'll cancel Sentinel publicly. And privately? He looked at her. I'll move the real system to a secure facility. Victoria whispered, You're going after Daniel. No. Armin's expression became cold. I'm going after everyone behind him. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. A new message appeared. Marcus Vale is alive. Below was an address. Armin's eyes widened. Victoria saw the screen. That's impossible. Armin grabbed his coat. Apparently not. Where are you going? To find a man who can destroy Daniel. Victoria reached for her weapon. I'm coming. Armin stopped. No. She looked at him. What? Because if this is a trap, I need someone Daniel doesn't expect. Victoria stared at him. Who? Armin opened the door. Myself. Then he disappeared into the darkness. And somewhere across the city, a man who had been hiding for 3 years was waiting. A man named Marcus Vale. A man who knew the truth about Daniel Cross. And a man who had been waiting for the right person to finally come looking for him. Armin reached the abandoned warehouse just before midnight. The message had been simple. Come alone. I know who betrayed you. He knew it was dangerous, but after everything that had happened, he needed answers. The warehouse was dark and silent. Marcus, Armin called. A figure stepped out from behind the crates. It was Marcus Vale, the former intelligence officer everyone believed was dead. You shouldn't have come, Marcus said. You sent the message. I needed to know if I could trust you. Armin stared at him. Then started talking. Marcus handed him a black folder. Inside were photographs, bank transfers, military contracts, and records connected to Sentinel. Armin's eyes stopped on one name, General Adrian Kane. Then another, Daniel Cross. Marcus pointed to a technical diagram. Your Sentinel system wasn't only being used for defense. Someone secretly added a backdoor. Armin's expression hardened. Who? Daniel. How? Someone inside the military gave him access. Armin looked through the documents again. Then he noticed something worse. The backdoor had been authorized using Victoria's credentials. No. Marcus nodded. Your wife created the original access route. Armin felt his chest tighten. What? She claimed it was designed to track Daniel. Did it work? No. Daniel stole the access key and turned it against the military. Before Armin could ask another question, gunfire exploded through the warehouse. Marcus pulled him behind a concrete pillar. They found us. Armin looked toward the exits. Several armed men were entering. They weren't ordinary criminals. Their uniforms carried military insignias. Armin whispered, They're protecting Daniel. Marcus nodded. They escaped through the rear door and disappeared into the darkness. 2 hours later, Armin returned to his secure office. Victoria called immediately. Where are you? Safe. Did you find Marcus? Yes. Silence. Armin, listen carefully. If Marcus gave you evidence, don't send it through military networks. Why? Because I don't know who I can trust anymore. Armin stared at the folder. Neither do I. He ended the call. Marcus entered the room carrying a small, encrypted drive. This is the real evidence. Armin inserted it into a secure computer. A recorded conversation appeared. Daniel's voice filled the room. Once Hale cancels Sentinel, we take control of the system. A second voice answered. And Victoria? Daniel laughed. She'll be blamed when everything collapses. Armin froze. The second voice belonged to General Kane. Marcus looked at him. They plan to destroy both of you. Armin stared at the screen. Then he realized something. If they wanted me blamed, they needed me to cancel the contract. Marcus nodded. Exactly. Armin smiled coldly. Then I'll give them what they want. The next morning, Armin publicly canceled the Sentinel defense contract. Reporters surrounded him. Mr. Hale, are you accusing the military of corruption? Armin looked directly into the cameras. I'm saying the system has been compromised. Behind the reporters, Victoria watched him. Their eyes met. Neither spoke, but both knew the real battle had begun. That evening, Daniel contacted Armin. You've made a smart decision. Armin replied calmly. I want protection. Daniel laughed. You don't negotiate from your position. I do if you need me. Silence. Armin continued. You need my authorization to access Sentinel. Daniel's voice became colder. What do you want? A meeting. Where? Warehouse 12. Daniel agreed. But Armin wasn't going alone. He secretly recorded everything. Daniel arrived with 2 armed men. General Kane arrived minutes later. Armin stood across from them. Kane said, Give us the Sentinel authorization. First, tell me who ordered this. Kane smiled. You don't need to know. Armin pressed him. Daniel. Kane shook his head. Daniel is only a tool. Armin's eyes narrowed. Then who controls you? Kane stepped closer. You'll never know, but the recorder captured everything. Suddenly, sirens sounded outside. Military police surrounded the warehouse. Kane's expression changed. Armin smiled. The recording is already transmitted. Daniel stared at him. You set us up. No. Armin looked at him. You set yourselves up. The officers stormed inside. Daniel was arrested. Kane was arrested. But before being taken away, Kane leaned toward Armin. You think you've won? Armin stared at him. Kane whispered. Daniel was never the mastermind. Then he was dragged away. Marcus appeared behind Armin. I know who was. Armin turned. Who? Marcus hesitated. The man who helped you build Sentinel. Armin's face changed. Richard. Marcus nodded. Richard Hale. Armin's mentor. His business partner. The man he had trusted for 12 years. The man who had always called him family. Armin stared into the darkness. For the first time, he wondered whether his entire life had been built on a lie. And somewhere far away, Richard Hale was already preparing his final move. Armin couldn't sleep after learning that Richard Hale might be the real mastermind. Richard had been his mentor for 12 years. He had helped Armin build his company, secure investors, and develop Sentinel. If Marcus was right, then the betrayal had started long before Armin realized it. At 3 a.m., Armin's secure computer suddenly flashed red. Unauthorized access. Sentinel Core. Someone was inside the system. Armin immediately called Ethan. Get to the office. What's happening? Someone is using my credentials. Within minutes, Ethan arrived with Marcus. Victoria came shortly afterward. Armin looked at her. Did you know Richard was involved? Victoria shook her head. No. Are you sure? Yes. She looked at the screen. How did they get your credentials? Armin stared at the system. Someone copied them years ago. Marcus nodded. Richard. Suddenly, a new message appeared. You should have left the contract alone. Armin typed back. Who are you? The answer appeared instantly. You know me. Then the screen displayed a photograph. Richard Hale. Victoria stepped backward. Richard. Armin clenched his fists. Another message appeared. Come to Facility 19. Alone. Ethan shook his head. It's a trap. I know. Then don't go. Armin looked at Victoria. They want me there because they need something. What? My authorization. Marcus nodded. Without you, they can't activate the final Sentinel protocol. Armin stood. Then we'll give them what they want. Victoria immediately said, I'm coming. No, I'm not letting you go alone. Armin looked at her. You already lost enough because of this. She stepped closer. So have you. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Armin nodded. Fine, but you stay behind me. Facility 19 was an abandoned military satellite station. Armin, Victoria, Ethan, and Marcus entered through a side entrance. The building was dark. Then the lights suddenly switched on. Richard appeared on a massive screen. Welcome, Armin. Armin stared at him. You betrayed me. Richard smiled. No, I invested in you. You used me. I gave you a purpose. Victoria stepped forward. You destroyed our lives. Richard looked at her. Your family destroyed itself. Armin noticed the Sentinel core behind the screen. You've been using my system. Of course. What? Richard's expression became serious. Because technology is power. You wanted military access. I wanted control. The screen changed. A map appeared showing multiple defense networks. Richard continued. Once Sentinel activates, I can control communication between military systems. Victoria looked horrified. You'll create chaos. Richard smiled. Chaos creates opportunity. Armin stared at him. You're insane. No. Richard looked directly at him. I'm prepared. A countdown appeared. 5 o'clock. Armin realized the truth. Richard wasn't trying to steal Sentinel. He was trying to use Armin to activate it. Richard spoke again. Give me the final authorization. No. Then Victoria dies. A camera appeared showing Victor Hale tied to a chair. Victoria gasped. Dad. Richard smiled. You have 5 minutes. Armin stared at the screen. Victor shouted. Don't give him anything. Richard cut the feed. Victoria looked at Armin. Don't do it. Armin nodded. I won't. He moved toward the Sentinel console. Richard laughed. You can't stop it. Armin entered his original credentials. The system rejected them. He tried again. Access denied. Marcus shouted. Armin. I know. Armin remembered something from the original Sentinel design. An emergency shutdown command. A hidden command that only the original architect could access. He opened the diagnostic panel. A message appeared. Architect override available. Richard's expression changed. No. Armin smiled. You forgot one thing. What? I built the system. Armin activated the override. The countdown froze. System locked. Richard screamed. What did you do? Ended your plan. The servers began shutting down. Richard's men attacked. Ethan and Victoria fought them off while Marcus secured the evidence. Richard attempted to escape. Armin chased him through the corridor. They reached the exit. Richard turned and raised his weapon. Before he could fire, Victoria stepped between them. The weapon discharged. Victoria fell. Victoria! Armin rushed to her. Richard ran. Ethan tackled him moments later. Armin held Victoria's hand. Stay with me. She smiled weakly. I told you I'd protect you. You almost died, but I didn't. Sirens approached in the distance. Richard was finally arrested, but the battle wasn't over. Because the evidence recovered from Facility 19 revealed something even worse. Richard had been working with people outside the military, people whose identities were still unknown. And one final file contained a list of every person connected to the conspiracy. At the bottom was Victoria's name. Beside it were two words, primary asset. Armin stared at the document. Victoria looked at him. I didn't know. I believe you. She looked surprised. Why? Because if you were part of this, you wouldn't have taken that bullet. Victoria smiled faintly. For the first time, Armin understood that their marriage might not be completely broken, but trust would have to be rebuilt one piece at a time. And Richard's arrest was only the beginning. 3 days after Richard's arrest, Armin thought the nightmare was finally over. He was wrong. At 6 a.m., every major news channel suddenly released the same headline. Armin Hale accused of military sabotage. Armin's photograph appeared across every screen. The reports claimed he had illegally accessed Sentinel, stolen classified technology, and attempted to disable military communications. Victoria stared at the television in disbelief. They're framing you. Armin nodded. Richard's network is still active. Ethan entered the room carrying a tablet. They moved faster than expected. Armin looked at the screen. An official military order had been issued for his arrest. Subject: Armin Hale, immediate detention. Victoria's face hardened. General Kane. Or someone above him, Armin replied. Marcus placed a small drive on the table. I found something before Facility 19 was shut down. Armin inserted it into the computer. A recording began. Daniel's voice filled the room. Once Armin cancels Sentinel, the government will blame him. Another voice replied. And Victoria? Daniel laughed. She'll be the perfect scapegoat. The recording ended. Armin stared at the screen. They planned everything. Marcus nodded. But we need more than a recording. What do you suggest? We make them confess. Armin looked at him. Ow! Armin thought for a moment. Then he smiled. We give them what they want. That evening, Armin released a carefully prepared message. It claimed he had secretly recovered Sentinel's core technology and was willing to sell it to anyone who could guarantee his safety. The bait worked. Within minutes, his secure phone rang. Daniel Cross, you've finally become reasonable. Armin replied calmly. I want protection. You'll get it. And money. How much? Enough to disappear. Daniel laughed. Where can we meet? Warehouse 12. Tonight. Agreed. Armin ended the call. Ethan looked at him. You know it's a trap. Yes. You're still going? That's why I'm going. Warehouse 12 was surrounded by darkness. Armin entered alone. Daniel was waiting with 2 armed men. A few minutes later, General Kane arrived. Kane looked at Armin coldly. You should have stayed hidden. Armin smiled. I was tired of hiding. Give us the Sentinel authorization. First, I want to know who ordered all this. Kane laughed. You aren't in a position to ask questions. Armin looked at Daniel. Then he knows. Daniel remained silent. Armin turned back to Kane. Who controls you? Kane's expression changed. People you will never meet. Armin smiled slightly. That's enough. Kane frowned. What? Armin touched the recording device hidden inside his jacket. The conversation is already being transmitted. Daniel immediately reached for his weapon. Kane stopped him. Don't. Suddenly, sirens filled the area. Military police surrounded the warehouse. Kane looked furious. You planned this. Armin shook his head. No, you did. The doors opened. Officers rushed inside. Daniel was arrested. Kane was arrested. But as Kane was taken away, he leaned toward Armin. You still don't understand. Armin stared at him. Understand what? Kane whispered. Richard was only the beginning. Then he was dragged outside. Hours later, Armin returned to the safe house. Marcus was waiting. You heard what Kane said? Yes. I investigated the remaining financial records. And Marcus placed a file on the table. Richard wasn't working alone. Armin opened it. The file contained several foreign accounts, private companies, and hidden trusts. At the center of them all was one name. VH Family Trust. Victoria walked into the room. She saw the document. My family. Marcus nodded. Your father and Richard were connected through this trust. Victoria's face went pale. I didn't know. Armin looked at her. I believe you. She stared at him. Why? Because they used your identity too. Marcus opened another document. Victoria's name appeared as the official executor of the trust. Someone had deliberately created a financial trail that made it look as though Victoria controlled the entire operation. Victoria whispered, they were going to blame everything on me. Yes. Armin looked at the evidence. Then he noticed something. A transfer had been made only hours earlier. Destination: Blackridge Defense Holdings. Marcus's expression changed. That's impossible. What? Blackridge was dissolved 5 years ago. Armin looked at the transaction. Then someone just brought it back. Ethan checked the location. His face became serious. It's registered to a private island. Armin looked at Victoria. Whose island? She stared at the screen. Then whispered. Richard's. Armin closed the file. He's not finished. That night, Armin stood alone outside. Victoria joined him. Are you leaving? Tomorrow. Where? Blackridge Island. Victoria looked at him. I'm coming. Armin shook his head. No. She stepped closer. Last time you went without me, you nearly died. So did you. Exactly. Armin looked at her injured shoulder. You've done enough. Victoria's voice softened. I know you don't trust me completely. He didn't answer. But I'm trying. Armin looked at her. So am I. She nodded. For a moment, they simply stood there. Then Armin's phone vibrated. One new message. Come to Blackridge. Below it was a photograph. Armin's entire company headquarters. And beneath the photograph was a single sentence. If you don't come, everyone inside dies. Armin's expression changed. Victoria saw the message. We're going. Armin nodded. But neither of them noticed the small camera hidden across the street. Someone was watching them. And on a distant monitor, a man smiled. Richard Hale was still alive. And he had one final plan. The next morning, Armin and Victoria flew toward Blackridge Island. The island was surrounded by rough water and steep cliffs. From the air, it looked completely abandoned. But Armin knew better. Someone had recently restored the private landing strip. Richard is here, Marcus said through the headset. Armin looked down. I know. Their helicopter landed near an old coastal facility. The moment they stepped out, the gates behind them locked. Victoria immediately raised her weapon. We're trapped. Armin looked around. A voice came through the speakers. Welcome to Blackridge. Richard. Armin stared at the building. Show yourself. Richard appeared on a large screen. You're finally here. You threatened my employees. I needed your attention. You could have called. You wouldn't have listened. Armin stepped forward. What do you want? Richard smiled. The same thing I've always wanted. Sentinel. No. Richard's expression became serious. I want what Sentinel represents. Control. Exactly. The screen changed. A live feed showed Armin's company headquarters. His employees were being held inside. Victoria's face hardened. Let them go. Richard shook his head. Once Armin gives me the final system key. Armin looked at the screen. You already have my old authorization. Not the new one. Armin understood. After destroying Sentinel, he had created a replacement emergency network for hospitals and disaster services. Richard wanted that technology too. You want my new company. I want your network. No. Richard smiled. Then people will die. Victoria looked at Armin. Don't give him anything. Richard laughed. That's exactly what she said last time. The screen suddenly switched. Victor Hale appeared. He was alive, but being held by armed guards. Victoria stepped forward. Dad! Victor looked at her. Don't listen to him. Richard cut the feed. Armin clenched his fists. Where is he? Below the facility. Armin looked toward the building. Then we're going down. They entered the underground facility through a hidden elevator. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Finally, the doors opened. A massive server room stretched before them. Richard was waiting. Victor was standing nearby. Daniel and several armed men were also there. Armin stopped. Daniel. Daniel smiled. You didn't really think prison could hold me, did you? Victoria looked furious. You escaped. Richard arranged it. Armin understood. Everything had been planned. Richard wasn't trying to rebuild Sentinel. He was trying to transfer its architecture into Armin's new emergency network. If he succeeded, he could control hospitals, emergency communications, and disaster response systems. Richard looked at Armin. Activate the network. No. Richard pointed a weapon toward Victor. Then he dies. Victoria whispered. Armin. Victor shook his head. Don't sacrifice thousands for me. Armin looked at him, then at Richard. You still don't understand. Richard frowned. What? You keep thinking I'm going to fight you using technology. Armin smiled. I'm not. He raised his hands. Because I already destroyed the network you're trying to steal. Richard's face changed. What? Armin looked toward Marcus. Marcus pressed a button. Every server in the room suddenly shut down. Richard stared at the dead screens. You lied. Armin shook his head. I redirected the system. Richard looked around in panic. What did you do? The network isn't here anymore. Ethan's voice came through the communication system. We've taken control of the island. Richard froze. Military helicopters appeared outside. The facility doors opened. Special forces stormed inside. Daniel tried to escape. Victoria stopped him. She pointed her weapon at him. Not this time. Daniel dropped his weapon. Richard looked at Armin. You think this changes anything? Armin stepped closer. It changes everything. Richard laughed bitterly. You'll lose everything. Armin shook his head. I already did. Then he looked at Victoria. And I rebuilt my life without you controlling it. Richard's expression collapsed. For the first time, he had nothing left. The officers arrested him. Victor was freed. Daniel was taken away. The remaining conspirators surrendered. Blackridge Island was finally silent. Later that evening, Armin stood outside the facility watching the sunset. Victoria joined him. It's over. Armin nodded. Yes. She looked at him. Are we over? Armin turned toward her. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, I don't know. Victoria lowered her eyes. I understand. But she looked up. I'm willing to find out. Her eyes filled with tears. Armin smiled slightly. Slowly, Victoria nodded. Slowly, they stood beside each other as the sun disappeared behind the ocean. For the first time, neither of them was fighting for a contract, a promotion, or control. They were simply trying to rebuild something broken. And this time, there would be no lies. No secrets. No Richard. No Daniel. Only the truth. The Blackridge operation became the biggest military scandal of the year. Within days, Richard Hale, Daniel Cross, and the remaining conspirators were formally charged. The evidence recovered from the island was overwhelming. Financial records, secret communications, illegal military contracts, and thousands of files proving that Sentinel had been manipulated for years. But for Armin, one question remained. What would happen to Victoria? She had not betrayed him intentionally. She had been manipulated, threatened, and used as part of Richard's plan. But that didn't erase what she had done. She had promoted Daniel. She had ignored Armin's warnings. And she had allowed their marriage to fall apart. One evening, Armin found her sitting alone outside the hospital. Her shoulder had finally healed, but the emotional wounds were still there. You've been avoiding me, Victoria said. Armin sat beside her. I needed time. For what? To decide what I want. She looked at him. And Armin took a breath. I don't want revenge anymore. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not saying I forgive everything. She nodded. I know, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life hating you. Victoria looked down. I don't want you to. Armin continued. You made terrible choices. I know. You broke my trust. I know. And I may never trust you the way I did before. Victoria's voice trembled. Then what are you saying? Armin looked at her. I'm saying we can start again. She stared at him. Again, not as husband and wife. Victoria's expression fell. Then as what? As two people who are finally willing to tell each other the truth. She smiled through her tears. I can live with that. 3 months later, the military tribunal released its final report. Richard had attempted to manipulate the defense network for personal control. Daniel had illegally transferred classified information. General Kane had abused his authority. And Victoria had been cleared of criminal involvement. But Victoria didn't return to her old position. She resigned from the military. The decision shocked everyone. A reporter asked her why. Victoria answered simply, I spent too long believing that power meant control. She paused. Now I know it means responsibility. Her resignation became one of the most discussed moments of the investigation. Armin watched the interview from his office. He smiled, not because she had resigned, but because for the first time, Victoria was making a decision for herself. Armin's new company continued growing. The emergency communication system he had created was now being used by hospitals, rescue teams, and disaster response organizations. Unlike Sentinel, it had no secret military backdoor. Every line of code was independently audited. Every major decision required multiple approvals. Armin had learned his lesson. Technology could be powerful, but people had to be accountable. One afternoon, Victoria walked into his office. I brought something. She placed a folder on his desk. Armin opened it. Inside was the final document transferring all remaining shares of the old defense company into a public trust. He looked at her. Why are you giving this to me? I'm not. She smiled. It's being donated. To whom? Families of military personnel. Armin stared at her. Victoria continued. Richard built his empire around power. I don't want anything connected to him. Armin nodded. That's a good choice. She smiled. I learned from you. Armin laughed softly. That's dangerous. She laughed too. For the first time in years, the tension between them disappeared. Not completely, but enough. That evening, Armin received a call. It was Marcus. There's something you should know. Armin's expression changed. What? The investigation uncovered one final document. Richard? No. Then who? Marcus hesitated. Your father. Armin froze. My father. Richard had financial records connected to him. Armin stood. That's impossible. I thought so too. Marcus sent the file. Armin opened it. His father's name appeared on a transaction dated 20 years earlier. The amount was enormous, but the description was even more disturbing. Sentinel Foundation, initial funding. Armin stared at the screen. Victoria looked over his shoulder. Your father helped fund the original project. Armin shook his head. My father died before I created Sentinel. Marcus replied through the phone. That's what Richard wanted you to believe. Armin's blood ran cold. What are you saying? There was another version of Sentinel. Before mine. Yes. Who built it? Marcus paused. Your father. Armin couldn't speak. The entire history of his life had suddenly become uncertain. His father. Richard. Sentinel. Victoria. Everything was connected. But Marcus had one final piece of information. There's an old facility. Where? Under your family's original property. Armin looked at Victoria. She understood immediately. We're going. Armin nodded. Because the story he thought had ended had just opened another door. And behind that door was a secret his father had taken to the grave. A secret that could change everything Armin believed about Sentinel. Armin couldn't sleep after reading the file about his father. For years, he had believed his father had died without leaving anything behind. Now he was learning that his father's greatest secret might have been the beginning of Sentinel. At sunrise, Armin and Victoria drove to the Old Hale family property. The house had been abandoned for almost 20 years. Dust covered the furniture. Old photographs hung crookedly on the walls. Armin stopped in front of one photograph. His father was standing beside a much younger Richard Hale. Both men were smiling. Armin stared at the picture. Why didn't he ever tell me? Victoria stood beside him. Maybe he was protecting you. From what? She didn't answer. They searched the house for hours. Finally, Armin noticed something unusual behind an old bookshelf. A small metal panel. He moved the shelf aside. A keypad appeared. Victoria looked at him. Do you know the code? Armin thought for a moment, then entered his father's birthday. The panel opened. Behind it was a staircase leading underground. They descended slowly. At the bottom was a forgotten laboratory. Old computers covered the walls. In the center stood a large metal console. Armin walked toward it. A screen suddenly activated. A recording began. His father's face appeared. Armin froze. His father looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, Armin, then Richard failed. Armin's eyes filled with tears. His father continued. Years ago, I helped develop an early defense communication system. Richard believed it could give us enormous power. The recording paused. I disagreed. Armin stared at the screen. I discovered that Richard had secretly designed a backdoor into the system. I tried to stop him. Victoria whispered. He knew. Armin's father continued. I couldn't destroy the project completely, so I hid the master architecture and separated the authorization into several pieces. Armin suddenly understood. That's why Richard needed me. His father's recording continued. I knew Richard would eventually try to finish what we started, so I created a final safeguard. A new screen appeared. Project Freedom. Armin's expression changed. The system wasn't designed to control governments. It was designed to prevent anyone from controlling the network. His father had built a kill switch that could permanently neutralize any future version of Sentinel. Armin whispered, That's what I used. Victoria looked at him. Your father knew this would happen. Maybe not exactly, but he prepared for it. Armin nodded. Then the recording revealed the final secret. Armin, if Richard ever comes after you, remember this. Never allow anyone to convince you that power is more important than people. The recording ended. Armin stood silently. His father's final words had finally reached him after all those years. Victoria placed a hand on his shoulder. He's proud of you. Armin looked at her. How do you know? Because you did exactly what he wanted. Armin smiled through his tears. I wish I could have told him. I know. Months later, the Hale Foundation announced the creation of the Freedom Initiative. Armin donated most of his remaining fortune. The organization would provide secure communication technology to hospitals, rescue teams, and disaster response agencies. No military control. No secret backdoors. No hidden owners. Every system will be transparent and independently audited. Victoria joined the foundation, not as Armin's wife, but as an equal partner. Their relationship slowly changed. They didn't pretend the past had never happened. They talked about it. They apologized. They listened. And little by little, trust returned. Not the blind trust they once had. Something better. Trust built on truth. One evening, they stood together outside the new foundation headquarters. Victoria looked at the building. You really walked away from everything. Armin smiled. I thought I was losing everything. And now? He looked at her. Now I know I was only losing the things I didn't need. Victoria smiled. Do you regret canceling the defense contract? Never, even though it cost you millions? Armin shook his head. Money can be replaced. What about Sentinel? He looked toward the sunset. I built it to protect people. He paused. When someone tried to turn it into a weapon, destroying it was the only way to protect them. Victoria nodded. I think your father would agree. Armin smiled. I think so too. She reached for his hand. This time he took it, not because he had forgotten what happened, not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because they had finally learned how to choose each other without fear. 1 year later, Armin stood before a large audience at the opening of the Freedom Initiative. Hundreds of engineers, doctors, emergency workers, and journalists filled the hall. Behind him was a simple message. Technology should serve people, not control them. Armin looked at the audience. I spent years believing success meant building something powerful. He paused. Then I learned that the greatest achievement isn't creating something powerful. The room became silent. It's knowing when to destroy it. The audience applauded. Armin stepped away from the podium. Victoria waited for him backstage. You were good. I was nervous. You didn't look nervous. I was. She smiled. You're getting better at hiding it. Armin laughed. Then his phone vibrated. A message from Marcus. Richard's final appeal was denied. He's officially being transferred to a permanent federal facility. Armin read the message, then deleted it. Victoria noticed. You're not going to read anything else? No. Why? Armin smiled. Because his story isn't mine anymore. He put the phone away. They walked outside together. The sun was setting. For years, Armin had believed his life was defined by Sentinel. By the contract. By his company. By Victoria. By Richard. By Betrayal. But now he understood something. His life wasn't defined by what had been taken from him. It was defined by what he chose to build afterward. He had lost his greatest contract. He had lost his old company. He had nearly lost his marriage. But he had found his father's truth. He had found his own purpose. And, most importantly, he had finally learned to walk away from power when power demanded a price he could never accept. Victoria squeezed his hand. Where are we going? Armin smiled. Home. And for the first time in years, the word didn't mean a building. It meant peace.